Hey, this is The Hard Truth. Tony Shaffer, powered by Sig Sauer, Never Settle. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. I always carry the best. You should carry the best. And today, as a matter of fact, it's a copy of what I carried in combat. It's my Frankenstein M11, which is the M11 A1. Sorry, get my nomenclature messed up. And I put another the Legion slide on it because I like the Legion. I'm a Legion guy, but I kind of modified that a little bit. But I still got the frame. It's basically what I carried in Afghanistan. I recommend you carry what you think you need to have. What you need to have is the best. The best is Sig Sauer. Never, ever settle. We are also on the America Out Loud podcast network and their talk radio network. So people can check us out at multiple places on their network. And we are supported by Swiss America. Call to get a free copy of their Secret War on Cash. It's not so secret. It's a war, and people are trying to diminish you of your economic freedom. They can help you navigate this. 800-289-2646, 800-289-2646, and tell them Tony Shaffer sent you. And also, we are Project Sentinel, projectsentinel.com. On X, we're Project PRJ_Sentinel. And then you can hear the old shows on the Hard Truth with Tony.com. A great resource. One I often turn people to hear about everything we've done. And without further ado, our guest today is my dear friend, Sean Parnell. Sean, Captain One Each U.S. Army, a good all-around egg. You are an egg, right? You're a good egg. A good egg, not a egg.
I've been cracked a couple of times. A couple of times, but I endure.
He's the author of The Man of War, and before that, Outlaw Platoon. And he hosts, I got it because I screwed it up earlier, the Battleground podcast here on Rumble. Well, I'm not on Rumble now. On Rumble, but my shows are all blurring together. Anyway, he's on Rumble 5 to 6 every day, right?
Yes. Yeah, Monday through Friday. Yes.
Yeah, Monday through Friday. Highly recommended because, man, oh man, does he get into stuff, and he does not hold back. So I appreciate that. And so we're here today to talk about several things. So right now, at the time we're taping this, which, people know that this is a pre-recorded show, 2 anniversaries coming up. We are at the 31 day actually anniversary of the attempted assassination of President Trump, which is near tragic. It was tragic for Mr. Campanelli. I always get his name right. Compatore. I apologize to his family for that. And then the other anniversary is the horrific withdrawal from Afghanistan. So that happened at the time we're taping this, one day before that. So we've got a lot to talk about, but let's start with Butler, Pennsylvania. You are from Western Pennsylvania. You've run for office, and I think we've talked on your show and in other venues about some of the shenanigans there. We won't get into that today, although I'd like to have you on later this year when we get closer to the election, because clearly things are going to heat up. But let's talk about what happened with President Trump. Now, at the time it happened, I was actually on the road, and I actually I work in support of Channel 9 Australia, and the Australians called me. It's like, hey, President Trump was just shot at, and so I had to pull over and do an interview. And boy, oh boy, they played the tape before I could comment on it, and I could hear the report. That report was, as you and I would agree, distinctly a 223 or 556, depending on whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it was an AR type platform. But you were there, and you were in the crowd, and you have a unique perspective by the fact that you've been in combat. You understand the ramifications of being shot at. You understand the necessary response. So let's just start off with what happened that day, Sean. Just tell us in your own words, if you could.
Yeah. So I've been on stage with President Trump 5 times now. This July 13th would have been my 5th time.
Yeah.
And get invited to the rally, just like I have done in rallies past. I show up there and instantly just feel like something was different. Now, it was 95 plus degrees, probably one of the hottest days in Western Pennsylvania this year, bar none. No clouds, no cloud cover, and no wind. And we arrived there. It's an outdoor venue. Immediately, I feel like something is just different. Not necessarily at this point awry, but just different. And if you've been in combat before, or you're a first responder doing an approach to a vehicle where there might be danger, it's difficult to articulate, but you just feel it. You just learn to notice
exactly what you mean. Yep.
And yeah, you just learn to notice it. And as I walked
God gives you that hair on the back of your neck for a reason. Just saying,
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And so I've just learned over time to trust that.
Yep.
Not necessarily knowing that there's meaning behind it, but just to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
And I get to the rally, and of course there's, huge line. I mean, it's just like any other Trump rally. Ended up being like something like 30,000 plus people there in small town Butler. But there was not a lot of security. There were lots of local police there who were like fulfilling the outer cordon, maybe some inner cordon duties, directing traffic, doing what local police do at these types of events.
Yeah.
I walk in there. There's a SWAT team there, clearly intended to be quick reaction force with like an unwrapped style vehicle. They're all poised and ready. That looked fine to me. And, I get in there, I immediately noticed 2 buildings right behind where President Trump is going to be speaking. Well, there were several buildings, but 2 counter sniper teams. One would look like was going to be over his left shoulder as you look at the podium on television, one over his right. And I'm looking back over the crowd because and I'm just trying to give people a sense of the lay of the land.
Right. Yeah, I think people need to know that. And you said earlier, it was a lot, that building was a lot closer than people really understand. So let's talk about that.
Okay, so if you're looking at the television and you're watching President Trump speak, you have him speaking at the podium, and then you see the bleachers behind him, the bleachers to the left, and the bleachers to the right. Right. Above those bleachers to the left and to the right were screens where President Trump would reference things as he's speaking. And I was in the first row on the ground directly to his left. Okay, so
I know what you're talking. I was in a similar position in Chesapeake, so we'll talk about that in a second too. So yeah.
So 20 feet to President Trump's left, I'm sitting there with my wife, and to the left and to the right of the bleachers, right, there are huge pieces of machinery on either side, and they're just construction equipment. And strung between those, they had these like big, almost crane-looking things where the flag was strung up in between. Right. And the strangest thing in the world happened as I'm up. First of all, I was like up there speaking. And I have pictures of this, but the flag, now keep in mind, there was no wind. And the flag, this huge American flag, gets tangled into what looks like, people said it looked like an eagle. People said it felt like some sort of an omen. They didn't like it. It looked like Christ on the cross. Like many people had very different.
I've seen the picture. Yeah, it's out there. Yeah.
It was just the most bizarre thing in the world. And so went back, met with President Trump 30 minutes before the attempt on his life. I mean, and let me just say as a quick side note, that dude is just on point. He is sharp. He doesn't forget. He remembers my wife's name, like remembers things that happened during the 2020 election cycle.
I hadn't talked to him for years, and I walk up and we pick up the conversation exactly where we left off last time. I mean, it was like, hey, man, and we picked it up. It was like, I don't know how he does it, but yeah, it's like I'm just going to say he's a brainiac. People don't give him credit for his intellect, but man, it was like he did not miss a beat. It's incredible.
Yeah, look, I mean, President Trump clearly marches to the beat of a different drummer, and I don't mean that in a negative way. No. But people forget that this guy built $1 billion plus company with tens of thousands of employees, and beyond that, like in his very first foray into what was a very serious presidential cycle in 2016, he beat a Bush and a Clinton in the same election cycle. Yep. 2 political dynasties that are formidable, and so that's an accomplishment in and of itself. So yeah, he's at the top of his game. And somehow, like, the crazy thing about Trump is, like, presidents go into the White House and leave the White House, and the White House ages them. Trump somehow looks younger. I don't know how that's possible. It's just so crazy. But so we meet him. He's super nice to me, super nice to my wife, remembers both of us. We walk out there and we take our position directly to his left. And what I'm seeing behind President Trump, and this is what's not talked about enough, is that there was a wood line about 1 kilometer behind him, behind the buildings with the counter snipers. Now, keep in mind, the counter snipers are looking out over the crowd and maybe towards some of the buildings where the shots came from. But primarily at the time, they were looking out over the crowd But I was thinking, this is when I realized, like, wait a second, like, there's a wood line that probably was about, 2 or 3 kilometers stretch, like, facing the podium, and then 8 to 10 kilometers deep. And I'm thinking, like, wait a second, like, you've got these woods that I can see from the stands over the bleachers that like, oh my God, like, you could get a company worth of infantry troops behind there. And no, like, it didn't seem like,
yeah.
Well, and while there were plenty of cops there, and there was a CERT team there, and a response team, Secret Service, there's no way in hell that they had the manpower to secure that wood line. It just is just not possible. So that was the first inkling that something was, like, just felt wrong. And then I started thinking, well, if there's a wood line back there, there's no counter snipers looking over the crowd towards President Trump and behind him. Right. And if there were, Tony, there would not have been any line of sight issues with the shooter on the building that was literally right behind us. So what people don't realize from the satellite images, Tony, is just how close the building was that the would-be assassin was in the prone and lining up a shot against Trump. I mean, it was probably 134 meters away, direct line of sight. So, I mean, somebody with a good arm could throw a rock and hit the damn thing. That is how close it was. And it just like felt like it was right on top of you. Clear line of sight to the podium. And so I'm sitting there, President Trump comes out, the crowd goes wild, and he starts immediately, I want to go off prompter. I hate these prompters. I tell my staff they're boring. And he's like, do we have my favorite immigration graphic? Let's find my favorite immigration graphic, put it up there. I'm going to talk to the crowd about it. So he turns his head and he's like, you see that arrow right there? Like, that's my favorite arrow, like, lowest immigration in this country's history. Like, and then he starts talking to the crowd, and the crowd is laughing. And then he turns to it one more time. And if you're looking at him on television, it was the screen to his left. But if you're Trump looking out over to the crowd, it's to his right. And so he turns his head real hard this time, the gesture, and that's when the shots rang out and hit him in the ear. And immediately I knew that it was sniper fire. Just immediately, I could hear the bullets. I could hear the bullets crack over my head, but I could just tell by I could tell that they were 223. I could tell it was sniper. I could tell based on just how the bullet sounded going overhead that they were close. I mean, there was part of me that even thought that maybe they were coming from the bleachers or inside the crowd. But then, all I remember is watching Trump speak, hear the bullets, get my wife on the ground, see the Secret Service rush towards Trump. He grabs his ear and goes down. At that point, I wasn't sure if he was going to make it because I didn't know the severity of his injuries. And I remember having my wife down on the ground, and I remember looking at her, and she wasn't like afraid of what was going on. I just remember she got these like blue eyes. She had these like big white, like eyes wide open, big bright blue eyes. And like, I'm thinking like, oh my God, like I've been in so many firefights before, but never in a firefight with my wife, and never in a firefight where I couldn't shoot back. And then I'm looking all around me, and people were just like, oh, they're fireworks. People had no idea. And I'm like, they're not fireworks. This is sniper fire. Everybody get in the prone immediately. And people were screaming like, what about President Trump? Is President Trump okay? I said, like, I hope so, but President Trump has the Secret Service. Like, take care of yourself right now, like get down in the prone until we can figure out what's going on. And right in the moment, just trying to figure out where the shooter is coming from, Tony, because if you ever find yourself under sniper fire, and I hope that people don't, but right, you got to know where the shooting is coming from so that you can figure out if you can move at all. Because like,
right.
Yeah, like you might not be able to. And if you can't move, where can you take cover, right? Actual cover, not concealment, actual cover. But then if you can ascertain the location of the shooter, and if you can move, how do you use cover and concealment getting out of there? So that's what I was trying to figure out, because there are 30,000 people there that had one exit. Where were they going to go? And by the way, Secret Service was clearly responding to Trump and doing everything they could to get him off the X. And you had the police officers who were out in the outer cordon, and you had the CERT team that was responding and rushing to the building. And then we started getting word that there were casualties on the bleachers directly behind us, because that's where Corey was sitting, directly behind my wife and I. And and you had some local police helping with casualties there, and we were trying to help as best we could with casualty evacuation. But there was really nobody. They didn't have the bandwidth or the manpower to help evacuate 30,000 people.
Right.
I mean, seriously, like that was like something that was very concerning to me. And one of the police officers, because I knew all the cops on the ground that day, because they're in my hometown, and they were saying that the shooter was down. And so I was thinking, okay, well, the shooter's down, but there could be more. Because as the shots rang out, saw this hydraulic line pop on a big piece of construction machinery that was to the right of President Trump as you look at him on TV, and the hydraulic line's going crazy. And I was thinking that maybe there had been some shots from that wood line, over, because all I heard was the rounds cracking over my head.
Yeah.
I wasn't exactly sure in the chaos of the moment which way they were coming from.
Right.
And so I figured they could just as easily be coming from the wood line. And so was operating under the assumption of 2 shooters. I passed that stuff along to the law enforcement officers. But what ended up happening in that moment, I turned to the elected leaders, and Mike Kelly, Dave McCormick, Dan Muser, 95-year-old Mrs. Fogel, the Republican National Committee chairwoman of Pennsylvania, Christine Toretti, was there. All of Pennsylvania's elected leaders were also directly in the line of fire.
Yeah.
I mean, like directly in the line of fire. And I just said, start moving out. And I just started yelling to people in the crowd to start making your way to the exit slowly. Just start making your way to the exit slowly. And there were people in the crowd, Tony, that, had been sitting in the sun all day long, 95 degrees. And the Trump campaign was doing a good job getting people water, but it was oppressively hot. And so you add the heat, the fact that they were in the sun as long as they were, and now borderline panic because getting shot at, you're seeing a guy that with blood all over the bleachers, and people started panicking and having heat related injuries. And that's when me and a couple of other veteran buddies who were there started carrying people to the medical evacuation tent, because like they were basically heat casualties, but they were out there in the open, so it's like, if there was another shooter, we had to at least get them medical care and get them out of, get them off the objective area, so to speak.
Right.
And so we started evacuating those people, carried as many as we could to the aid station, and then just started pushing the crowd out as orderly as possible. Because I kept saying to people, like, they keep saying the shooter's down, but there might be more than one. Because a typical, tactic, technique, and procedure or something this, it's like you get one sniper that takes a shot at you, and maybe you get the sniper, maybe you don't, and then they lay low for 30 minutes. Everybody gets complacent, and then they hit you again when you group up. So I was just trying to tell people, just move out, get to your cars and start evacuating. And that's when we realized that, there were a bunch of wheelchairs left behind as well. Not, again, left behind nefariously. It's just that there were old people in them and old people pushing them. And how those rallies are, Tony, the outdoor ones, they're just rocks everywhere. And one exit and 30,000 people moving. Like, what do you do with wheelchairs? And so they were all left out in the open. So again, me and a couple of other America First patriots and a bunch of veterans just started grabbing the wheelchairs and consolidating them in cover and then pushing them out one by one. And we ended up getting out of there at I think I got home at like 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Wow.
And what's interesting is that you had texted me, but none of that stuff was going through, which tells me that the Secret Service or whoever was in charge tactically that day had engaged some sort of ECM or electronic countermeasure. And then we come to find out that Crooks he had allegedly had explosives in his car and some remote detonation device on his person.
Right.
And that leads me to believe, like, okay, first of all, I've been in combat before, you've been in combat before, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like we know how to build home explosives, that we're explosive ordnance disposal guys. Like that's a level of skill that, I certainly don't have. And none of my soldiers in my platoon had that experience as well. And then it gets me thinking to things like this. One, how does that happen? Two, how does Crooks learn to build household bombs on a very short timeline? Because Trump announced the rally 8 days in advance. So you mean to tell me this kid had 8 days? He's a 20-year-old kid. He outsmarted the premier protection agency in the world, and he was able to build household bombs. He was able to smuggle them all past the United States Secret Service and all those local police. He was able to crawl up on a building that should have been occupied by force with people. He was able to get in like an amazing spot, like the one spot you would want to be if you're going to take a shot at President Trump, direct line of sight. Like, Tony, even if you don't have the manpower to get up there, hang a flag there, like obstruct the line of sight, do something. None of it was done. And how the hell does this kid build explosives, not just explosives, just an RC remote control I mean, in 10 days? And then you talk to, members of Congress who are like investigating this, and they're like, they go into the shooter's house. It looks like pristine, no silverware, allegedly. Like, no, it's just like everything about this makes no sense. And then, of course, you add to all of that what I just said, Tony, that you have former director of the United States Secret Service, Cheadle, testifies in front of Congress, lies. Then the acting director of the U.S. Secret Service, Rowe, testifies in front of Congress, lies. And then you had Christopher Wray, director of the FBI, testifies in front of Congress, lies. Deputy director of the FBI, lies. And then still, here we are a month later. We don't know anything. Nothing. It's just staggering to me.
So let's walk through some of this, because in contrast to that, I wanted to talk about my experience in Chesapeake 3 weeks before. So, and by the way, it's something called the Stingray. I'm a member of law enforcement in Virginia, which I'll talk about in a second. There is something called the Stingray, which can function as both a bridge as well as a system that can shut down signals. So I presume they had one deployed. Someone did, because that way you can actually control the signals in and out, and either with precision or by just across the board stop and mitigate signals. That means everybody's phone. So it sounds like something like that was going on. But the other thing, and by the way, my neighbor, literally my neighbor, Lori Buckout, is running for Congress. She's the Republican candidate for District 1 here in North Carolina. She used to be part of something called JIATO, the Joint Interoperability, Joint Improvised Threat Defense Organization.
Yeah, I remember that. JIATO, yeah.
So, and they develop things to prevent IEDs from going off. They actually have jamming technology. So I presume that maybe something like that was also fielded, which is not a bad thing. But then you ask questions like, how do they know to bring that? Or was it there? And how was it used? Because we don't have answers. And the other thing I wanted to bring up, as a member of law enforcement in Virginia, I advise Sheriff Dave Decatur in Stafford County. God bless Dave. Dave's sheriff. Just you've been in his county. Stafford County is just south of Quantico. It's got the worst traffic in Virginia. If you're on 95 going north, just saying, sorry, Dave, it's the truth. It is horrible. I mean, I have 9 out of 10 times you're slowed down going through Stafford, which it's right between Fredericksburg and Quantico, and it's not David's fault. He didn't build the road, but he does his best to enforce laws. But the point is that as a member of law enforcement, it took me. I had to go through 5 layers of security, Sean, to get to where I needed to be at the point of the event where Trump was speaking in Chesapeake. And like you, I was able to meet with President Trump. We had a great conversation, had an amazing, the guy just doesn't forget anything. It's amazing. He just goes through. I don't want to say everything we talked about, obviously, but he was very complimentary, appreciated the work I'd done. There's some other things we want to talk about, later in the year, obviously, when things get closer to the election. But my point is, it was obvious that there were overlapping and continuous layers of security. They were interlocked, and they were channelizing people. The parking lots were all very well laid out. There was clearly law enforcement everywhere. In all these parking lots, they were all there. They were all at the edge, and they were directing people in. And then their Secret Service people were posted at key locations, some uniformed, some not. And, by the way, aviation. They had a helicopter overhead flying. So, clearly there were drones on the periphery as well. So, Sean, how do they go from an amazing overlay of interlocked security to, Governor Youngkin was there too. Youngkin was in the same row, like you were there with the leadership of Pennsylvania. We were there with Virginia. How do you go in 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Well, 3 weeks. How do you go from 3 weeks to being completely competent, well laid out security, everybody working together to we forgot to search a building? How does that happen?
It does. I keep saying the same thing, Tony, and that's just the same word keeps jumping to my mind, and that's it's just incomprehensible.
Yeah.
And then you have these seemingly what you would assume to be smart people like Cheeto and Roe and Ray saying stupid things and lying. It just reeks of corruption, reeks of some form of cover-up, reeks of something that they don't want the American people to know. And that's not me. That's just their own actions saying that. And it makes no sense, Tony,
well,
because
we can't let this die. We got to keep this front and center. Right now, they're trying to do the Orwellian. It's like, I don't know if it's Orwell or Jedi mind trick. Like, this is not the that you need.
yeah,
So, they are. And so, but when we come back on that, because you have a great theory about what's going on, which I believe is correct, relating to why they're doing what they're doing, relating to what they want, not what we want, not what what they want as a political party. So we'll cover that. We're taking a break right now. We'll be back with part 2 of The Hard Truth, Tony Shaffer, right after this. Hey, this is The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer, part 2, still powered by 6 Hour. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. I carried the best. You should carry the best. The best is 6 Hour. Never settle. We're still also supported, we're on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network and their podcast network. Check them out. Great summary of our work there and other good products that they have. Some of our friends are over there. And then also, we are powered by another good organization, Swiss America. Call them today to get something good. And that good thing is the Walking Liberty $50. It's a great offer. You need to look at it. Hard currency. Silver is a great resource, a great investment. You want to have that in case things get difficult. And plus, it won't devalue itself. It's a great thing to have. It's something real. So we're real here. You need to be real with them. 800-289-2646. 800-289-2646. Tell them Tony Shaffer sent you. We are Project Sentinel, projectsentinel.com. And then hear the past shows with The Hard Truth of Tony. And a quick shout out to our friend Cherie Curry. Cherie does our bumper music and our theme. Rock and Roll Oblivion. Man, oh man, are we in oblivion or what? So let's get out of the oblivion and get back with Sean Parnell, who's the author of Man of War, a great novel. And then, of course, Outlaw Platoon, his memoir, which is I think it's a great read because it talks about Afghanistan. I wish we had time to get into today, but we don't, because it's the anniversary of the painfully flawed withdrawal from Afghanistan. Without further ado, though, Battlefront. Right, we got to talk about
Battleground.
Man, oh man, why am I doing this Joe Biden stuff today? Battleground on Rumble, 5 to 6 every day for the latest. Sure. Go check them out. You will not be disappointed. So anyway, back with Sean. So Sean, one of the things that we talked about a little bit, and I wanted to make sure people understood, is there's a reason why they're trying to do the Jedi mind trick. Trump is not your candidate. Kamala. Oh my God, what? She's wonderful. Yeah, nobody voted for her, and she's hideous, but she's really the best choice. Why, Sean, are you seeing headlines being changed? All this drama, trying to convince people that someone who's been by their side considered her hideous. She barely made 1% in the 2020 cycle, I think, and my friend Tulsi Gabbard called her out. What's going on with this Orwellian effort to give her credibility and make people think that she's actually ahead in the polls?
Well, it's a great question, and it's an important one. When you run in a campaign, if the first phase of that operation, the first phase of that campaign, I know I've done it twice, is to run in a primary. And when you're in a multiple candidate field and you're in a robust primary, the mission is to consolidate as much of the base as humanly possible behind you. And if you do that, you end up the winner of a primary. Well, here's the thing. Kamala Harris was selected. She wasn't elected. She never ran in a primary. As you mentioned, in 2020, she got out before the first caucus state. She was so wildly unpopular in her own party, she got out before the actual voting began. She actually ran out of money because there was just no excitement behind her candidacy whatsoever. And ironically enough, like, candidates typically there are two types of candidates in my experience, having worked with a bunch. You have candidates, use Barack Obama as an example. Guy's as radical as you could possibly imagine, but fakes it to make it, right? He talks a good game. Barack Obama in 2008 was able to reshape the electorate through, of course, lying, but he was good in public. He talked a good game. He had charisma. Kamala Harris has the opposite problem, which means like the harder she works, the less popular she gets, which is why the Democrat Party at large, along with the media, are trying to hide her. But the point is, she's never been in a primary. She's never consolidated her base. So a couple things are happening. First, let's evaluate the vice presidential pick. Okay, it was either going to be Shapiro from my Poindexter governor from Pennsylvania, largely perceived to be a moderate. Of course, we understand there are no moderate Democrats. They all vote the same way.
Exactly.
But he's from the critically important state of Pennsylvania. Like there is, to be clear, there's no pathway forward, no pathway to the White House for the Democrats without Pennsylvania. They absolutely have to have it. So you would think, okay, the guy's a moderate. The guy has a 60% approval rating in Pennsylvania. And of course, I use the term moderate loosely, and he's the governor of a state that you need to win. And he just won it in a landslide a couple years prior. And then you have Tim Walz, a governor from Minnesota, who is as radical and as crazy as they come. I mean, legit crazy. I mean, tampons in boys' bathrooms, crazy. Like, hey, the state will take custody of your children if you don't believe in gender affirming care, even though there's no such thing as gender affirming care. But this guy's a total whack job, a total communist in every single sense of the word. She picks Walz, which for a couple things. So that tells me that the Democrats are worried about what you call base fracture. In other words, the pro-Hamas terrorist sympathizing wing of their base was at risk of not voting, as evidenced by tens of thousands of them voting uncommitted in the primary against Biden. Kamala was clearly worried about that and felt that she needed to shore up her base by selecting a radical like Walz, who was also seen as a terrorist sympathizing pro-Hamas guy. So that's step one. Step two, it's always helpful if your vice presidential candidate brings something. And in this case, Walz brings Minnesota. Well, the Democrats haven't lost Minnesota rather since I think 1972.
Right.
But this cycle, you saw the polling leading up to it. It looked like Minnesota was going to be in play. So it leads me to think, are the Democrats afraid of losing Minnesota? And if they can shore up their base and selecting a radical like Walz and lock down Minnesota, good for them. And so now you have the media that's marching in lockstep with her campaign, trying to gaslight her base about just how amazing she is. She's the second coming of Black Indian woman Jesus. She's smart. She's talented. She definitely didn't sleep her way to the top. Not stuff with Willie Brown, all a lie. I mean, seriously, this is the level that they're going to make people feel like she's competent.
Clearly, one of the important points regarding this, just the way polls work. Statistically, they can't shift not like 180, like literally.
Correct.
Sean, talk about that a little bit, because it's like we're supposed to believe that somehow the horrible number she had personally as the most unpopular vice president in history is now she's the cat's meow. And of course, cat ladies do love her, but just saying.
I mean, seriously, get this. So,
cat ladies love her.
Yeah, Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert, as Chris likes to call him. They were making fun of Kamala Harris not 6 months ago for being like wildly unpopular, 28% approval rating. She's less popular than Dick Cheney, who shot an old man in the face. Like that was their punchline. And we've gone from that to her being the second coming of Jesus. And polling, to your point of polling, Tony, like polling does, if she really did have momentum, if this phenomenon that is Kamala Harris was in fact real, would there be a polling shift? Yes, but it would be much more gradual. It would be, half the damn country doesn't even know who she is. I know it sounds crazy, but name ID is a big thing. Trump and Biden had 100% name ID. The vast majority of people don't even know who Kamala Harris is at this point.
That's good for her, though. That's good for her.
But she's not. She can't be that popular overnight, because it's not possible.
It's not possible. So clearly, they have changed their sampling methods, and again, as Republicans, by the way, that look, Trump is ahead, Trump is winning, Trump's going to beat Biden. Like all of those polls were released prior to dropping out in an attempt to pressure Biden to get out. So this race was always going to be close, no matter who is at the top of the ticket. But I reject the notion that Kamala overnight is wildly popular and more popular than the most electrifying political figure in my lifetime, who is Trump. And by the way, like I'm a Trump guy. I make no qualms about it. But I'm still here telling you that this race is going to be really, really close, regardless of who's at the top of the ticket. But again, I reject the fact that she's somehow running away with this thing and has all this momentum. It's just AstroTurf crap.
Yeah. Elizabeth?
Oh my gosh. There are so many good points there, but I thought it was interesting when you pointed out the Democrats need Pennsylvania, and yet they went with Minnesota. That I thought that was really interesting because we've been listening a lot to Newsmax, of course, and all the different people who are explaining if she had made, it's almost like playing poker. You relate it to poker, a strategic move. If she had chosen Shapiro from Pennsylvania, that would have like almost sealed her votes. But she didn't. And I thought we were all thinking the same thing. Why would she go with such an extreme? I mean, like you said, there's no such thing as a moderate. The Democrats like to say, well, there's, all these different people, they're moderates. Not really. But the fact that she went with Tim Walz and not Shapiro, Pennsylvania, we were wondering the same thing. How crazy is that? But I don't know, like you said, the vast majority of people really don't even know who Kamala Harris is. So I wonder if that's her strategy. They don't know who I am, but now that I have Tim Walz, we're going to do all our rallies. We're going to be campaigning. And it just seems kind of bizarre to me. But a friend of mine, she's a little bit older than I am. I think she's maybe in her 70s. She's been a nurse a long time. And I'm saying that for a reason. She recently said, because we went to see her about a week ago, she said, "Oh, did you see Kamala chose Tim Walz? Gosh, there's so much joy. I just feel the joy." And it's like, and my husband was there too. It's like, what do you mean joy?
Yeah.
The only joy she picked with him was Joy
This
Reid.
won't all watch you. So I don't understand that either. But she said, there's joy there. Like, I didn't know what she was talking about, but I'm thinking Tim Walz is like our former governor. He supports abortion up to the moment of birth, and even after a baby is born. He's like former Governor Ralph Northam. Well, if the mother decides not to have the child, we'll make the child comfortable. It's like, I don't understand how someone who works in healthcare, who's helped deliver babies, would vote for someone who has no problem with killing babies up to the moment of birth and even after. That's what blows my mind. So like you said, a lot of people don't know Kamala Harris' name. It's like some people are so ignorant. It's almost like they choose to be ignorant. I don't get that.
Well, I'll tell you, like it's not
really a question so much. It's more like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things jump out at me from what you were saying, and one of them is this: you can tell. I think the media's hold on the people is getting less pronounced. I think they have less influence than they've ever had before, and because of that, their propaganda has just gotten so brazen, because they're just trying to claw back what little influence they have left.
Right.
And it's never been more apparent in my life to pick out people who still believe that propaganda. And to your point about your friend who's the nurse, there's so much joy. Well, that is a complete fabricated media narrative. And I'm talking ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, have all been pushing, there's joy. Look at all this joy. Oh, they're happy. And Trump is gloomy and JD Vance is weird. But look at this. They're having fun. The blah, blah, blah. It's all fake, fabricated crap. So that to me, your friend who's a nurse, don't know her, she could be real nice. Clearly she's still buying hook, line, and sinker what the media is selling and is therefore content to be fed propaganda, right? And hoaxes, because that's exactly what it is.
I don't get it. It's like, how can you be that educated and work in healthcare? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other thing with Shapiro, so your point about Shapiro, I have heard in Democrat circles that people like Shapiro didn't really want the job anyway because they thought Kamala was going to lose. And if Kamala loses, it makes it harder for them to make the case in 2028, which, by the way, Newsom, Whitmer, Shapiro, they're all running in 2028. They don't want to be saddled with a loss, right? And it's easier for them to make the case, come on the scene in 2028. I'm here to save this nation from Trump and what might very well be 4 years of a Trump presidency. I'm here to undo all of this. I'm here to save this country from Trump. And so why would you want to take a shot with Kamala Harris, who's, by the way, reviled in her own party? Nancy Pelosi doesn't like her. The leadership of the Democrat Party doesn't like her. Her own colleagues don't like her. So to me, a great way to get rid of Kamala is to have her run against Trump, have her lose. Maybe she does a little bit better on the polling. There's not a political bloodbath in the House and the Senate. They can keep their margins close and then run who they perceive, the Democrats perceive, they think they have a very deep bench in Newsom from California, Whitmer from Michigan, Shapiro from Pennsylvania, a robust primary, strong candidate emerges. It's a hell of a lot easier for them to do that if they don't have a loss.
Right. So I think that's the issue at this point, is that nobody seems to be speaking up about that very thing, Sean, is that Kamala Harris hasn't received a single vote, and yet she's going to be anointed. Well, I don't know what you want me to say. It's like she's not had a single vote by her party, the Democrat Party. Isn't it in the name Democrat? She hasn't had a single vote in a democratic process, right? I mean, not a single vote, and nobody seems to be talking about it.
Well, that's what concerns me the most. I mean, because, and I've said this many times in the last couple of weeks, and that is the media. Not only have they tried to move on from the Trump assassination at lightning speed, they have completely normalized the fact that they have destroyed democracy within the Democrat Party. And what concerns me about this is that if that anti-democratic sentiment metastasizes beyond the Democrat Party, and somehow we become a country where the elites select people and not elect them, that dynamic is real. That dynamic is happening right now in the Democrat Party, all while the media is covering it up. And our institutions have grown extraordinarily powerful through the legislative branch, the voice of we the people, ceding, legislative authority to institutions and departments who all report to the president as part of cabinet level positions, right? All of these institutions that form the president's cabinet, one, it consolidates power around the executive, but two, it makes up the core of the strength of the deep state. It's through our own voice of we the people ceding legislative authority to the executive branch. So now you have the voice of the people greatly diminished, the rise of the deep state in these institutions who are exerting their influence more and more to interfere in elections. Look no further than Hunter Biden's laptop for proof of that. Like, these weren't just like knuckle dragging spooks saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. These were like former directors of the CIA, for God's sake. Right. And then all while the Democrats are rigging their own elections within the Democrat primary. And then, of course, it stands to reason if they're willing to rig primaries against their own people, well, then almost certainly they're willing to rig general elections in areas that they control against a political party that is diametrically opposed to the views of their own, right? I mean, so this is not a good cocktail. This does not foreshadow good things to come for this country. And that's what really worries me, is that by the time people wake up to that reality, it'll be too late.
Well, all I was thinking, as soon as I heard that Kamala Harris was the actual nominee at this point, all I was thinking was, what? Was Dick Gephardt busy? But it is that time again, Tony.
It is. Sean, I don't know if you knew this, but you're walking into the danger zone.
That's right. We can get you in trouble here.
And not the Kenny Loggins one either. Just saying. So
wait, so not like Top Gun danger zone?
No, but I think I'm all right. Okay.
That's right.
Anyway, here we go. This is Tony's Takes, and it's powered by Sig Sauer. Never settle. We're
Never
get
settle.
Your takes. Yep, Tony's Takes. We'll get, of course, Sean's and Elizabeth's takes too.
Like this.
Yeah, here we go. Let's make it easy. Here's a good one for you. I'll put up a T-ball for you. Kamala Harris says she wants to close immigration detention centers if she's elected. But wait a minute. Couldn't she actually have done that already or do it now? Where would she put them anyway, unless she copycats another Trump policy? Stay in Mexico. What's your take, Tony?
So I think that there's adequate room in Gavin Newsom's house because of his massive hair salon. He's got a hair salon that goes the length, like it's like 380 meters, and you could probably like stack people together in there. So, you know, if you want to actually take advantage of, and by the way, I think he used some of that $24 missing billion to build this hair salon in his house. So it's quite effective. And I think if you consider the fact that most hair products are edible, you could feed him at the same time because, man, he uses so much. You could just take some of that,
There you go.
give it to him. Just, you know, give it to, they got barrels of the stuff there. Just saying. So, Sean, what do you
What
think?
do you think, Sean?
Is this like a serious thing? Do I have to come up with witty, pithy responses?
No.
It's potluck on that one.
It's probably better if you come up with serious, so that way I don't get in trouble.
Oh, yeah,
I am
I'll get in
not-
trouble no matter what. So.
I am not like. First of all, it's hard to compete with that response from Tony. But I would say like clearly what the Democrats are doing are taking these illegal alien invaders and flying them to swing counties all around the country in the hopes that they'll be registered to vote, not in the hopes that they themselves vote, but if they're on the rolls, the Democrats will vote for them. And that to me is the big unknown this election cycle, because yes, patriots are going to be much more aware than they were during the 2020 election. That much is sure. But the big anomaly that people really aren't tracking is how are these illegal aliens who are coming here and registering to vote? And yes, they can register to vote on a temporary work visa with the last four of a social security number. Like, if they don't vote, you can bet that the Democrats are going to vote for them. And that's why Biden is flying these people to swing states and in Democrat states, deep blue states, so that their census numbers are favorable. So, I mean, that's what I think they're doing. But the hair gel thing with Gavin Newsom could totally be legit as well.
It's very tasty, I hear too. I've heard, you know, it can be used as a additive to Caesar salad. It holds. Good. All right, Chris, what's next?
Here's another one. I decided to break down and watch a little bit of the Olympics, even though it's not winter and I like hockey, even though that's a little wimpified as well when it comes to international competition. I'm watching this and I'm thinking, how in the heck did breakdancing become a competition in the Olympics, a medal bearing competition in the Olympics? That's not even a sport. And it went out. The good breakdancers retired 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago.
Right. So, well, I don't know if you know this. There's a new competition that's based on the success of this one. It's called the Dingleberry Contest. So they're going to be measuring dingleberries as an Olympic sport. Now, how they're going to do that yet, I don't know. They got to sort out gender issues first because you want to have male and female dingleberries, right?
If it's on the passport, it counts.
Yeah, and apparently they still can't figure out biologically if men are men or women are women. The guy, one of the spokesmen said, I wish there was a test we could use to figure it out. You know, I don't know. Sean, what do you think? You think they're going to?
Well, first of all, like, you know, the story of this ray gun chick that got in.
White old Australian feminist chick.
And her, I guess her husband was part of the evaluating committee that let her in. So, and then she gets in there, and I watched the entire thing. Like, I couldn't believe that people weren't laughing at her in the crowd. And then the freeze frames of the people's faces behind her where they're like, and then she gets 0 points. And then now the best part about this are all of the memes. Like, I saw a meme this morning of her like rolling around and convulsing on the ground. Of course, she's calling that breakdancing. And somebody put her in like a tumble cycle of a washing machine and said, this is my comforter when it gets all tangled up in the washing machine. And she's like rolling around in there like a crazy person. But like, first of all, like the Olympics. So that happened in an Olympics. Keep in mind that happened on the tail end of the Republican National Convention. And there's a dude with a blonde beard as part of the opening ceremonies. And I thought for a second, well, the Republican National Convention had Hulk Hogan there. And he spoke. He's an unconventional convention speaker. So is the Olympic Committee just trying to mimic the RNC by getting a dude with a beard as part of their opening ceremonies? That's my conspiracy.
That's
Yeah,
like a
you know,
millennial uniform, isn't
That's
it?
interesting.
yeah,
I'm
it could
for
be.
that.
Well, I don't know. If you're a soy boy, you can't have a beard. So I don't know.
Yes, you have soy face. Hey, but get
That's
this, gentlemen, this gun, this ray gun chick or whatever, she actually has, now get this, Tony, a PhD in breakdancing and dance culture,
Well,
according
it
to
paid
SBS
off.
News.
It paid off.
He does.
That's great. That's a great investment. By the way, she's now hiding out in Europe. She will not. The Australia. She's. This is not. I'm not joking. This is true. She's not going back to Australia. So I guess
You're
maybe the
kidding.
Australians were all that happy with her performance.
She's hitting
Maybe if
with
you'd
her
done it with a
Oh my
kangaroo. You think it would have been better with a kangaroo? Everything's better with kangaroos, right?
Yes.
I
Tiny
don't know.
kangaroo
They'll
down
beat the
sport.
crap out of you.
The way
Yeah.
things
Don't
are,
ever mess with a kangaroo.
the way
Yeah,
things
so-
in Australia are going, she probably just doesn't want to end up in like a detention camp for horrible breakdancing.
Ooh.
Ooh,
That's right.
that would've hurt.
They'd have to
Oh.
re-educate her and make her figure out how to do ballet. That'd be bad. All right. Well, speaking of we've done a great psychological ballet. We presented some great information today for our audience. It has been. It's been like Swan Lake for smart people, right? It is.
We
Seriously.
tried.
We covered
So
so
anyway,
much.
it's been great fun. No, Sean, it's been great. Thank you again for having me on your program. We did a deep dive on election issues on your program.
Yes.
And so I highly recommend people. Is that available still online, by the way?
Yeah. Oh, our episode. Yes. First of
Yeah.
all, like my audience absolutely love that, like, because they love to hear from first person sources on the ground during the 2020 cycle. And what
Yeah.
I say is that, like, you got to study history to make sure we don't repeat the same mistakes of the past. So
Right.
that was like one of our most
Exactly.
popular episodes. And
Right.
they love it. It's still out there. You can go check it out on my Rumble page.
Yeah, catch it 5 to 6 every day. Battleground, not Battlefront, although Battlefront's a good name, but Battleground
name.
is the title. And check out the one
Battleground.
that Sean did, where we did a deep dive on Jesse Morgan and some of the election issues, which they are still facing. You guys are still, like we said, in the danger zone, not the Kenny Loggins one either. So something that people need to pay attention to. Anyway,
Don't forget
until
Kenny
yeah.
Loggins. Oh,
Anyway,
man.
so anyway, thanks to the team, Elizabeth and Chris and Sean. We want to have you back because, man, there's going to be a lot more to talk about regarding a month from now. Mark my words, even Orwellian effort to prop her up, it ain't going to work. So next month, maybe, sometime September, October, we should talk more about this because I think, plan A was Biden. It didn't work. Plan B was Trump being taken out. You talked about that. Didn't work. Plan C is Kamala. And I think they're going to have to go to a plan B. And I'd like to talk about that next month if Kamala falls through, which I think she will. So
Sounds good to me. Sounds good to me.
thanks, folks. Thanks for being here at Hard Truth. We'll see you again very soon. Take care.
See ya.